Welcome back to Travel Worth Living. This episode was a really fun conversation. I got to talk with Alida, who lives in Australia. She works in the Outback as a helicopter pilot, as a tour helicopter pilot. And she's based near Uluru, the very famous red rock formation there in the Outback. It's known as the Red Center in Australia's Northern Territory just because of all the iron in the sand. It's like a red desert, including the sandstone monolith, which is Uluru, the large rock. Anyway, awesome conversation. It was kind of this mix between my love of travel and my love of aviation, so I had a lot of fun, and I'm sure you're going to enjoy it as well. If you prefer just listening to this conversation, be sure and check out the podcast by clicking the link in my description, and also connect with us on social media. You can find me on Instagram and Facebook at Travel Worth Living, or get in touch via our website at travelworthliving.com. All right, here is my conversation with Alida. Well, Alida, welcome to Travel Worth Living. Thanks so much for coming on the podcast. I'm excited to chat with you.
Thanks, Seth. I'm super excited.
Yeah, so let's go ahead and start by telling me where you're at right now and what you're doing.
So I live in the central Outback in Australia, so pretty much smack bang in the middle, in the desert. So I fly helicopters out here doing mainly scenic tours. I reckon maybe 1%, if that, is doing the search and rescue stuff, a bit of film, photography, yeah, but mainly just scenics, yeah.
Got you. That's awesome. And so, yeah, when you live in the Outback, what part of the Outback do you live in? Are there different parts? Like, I haven't been to Australia yet, so.
There are.
Because from the stuff I see on Instagram, you're in a very dry part.
Yeah, so I'm in the part that's known as the Red Center, because if you've seen all my photos, it's red sand everywhere. It's got, it's really iron-rich soil, so it is bright red. It's when you say the Outback, that's what people think of. Yeah.
Gotcha.
But I wouldn't say there's not like a bunch of kangaroos hopping everywhere though, because it's still too hot. It's too dry. There's not enough grass for them. So when tourists come here, they still like, oh, where are all the kangaroos? You're like, yeah, sorry.
They're taking a siesta. They hopped away.
Yeah.
So what kind of animals do you have there?
Lots of reptiles, lots of snakes, scorpions, lots of lizards. When it's wet season like it is now, wet season, it's like it rains maybe one day every couple of weeks. Then you get birds, lots of different parrots and stuff like that. Camels. We have the largest wild camel population in the world. Fun fact, 1.2 million.
Interesting.
Yeah. And what else do we have here? I mean, we do have like little wallabies and kangaroos, but they don't really come out during the day. They just all come out at night, so you don't really see them. Yeah.
Gotcha.
Mainly snakes and lizards.
That's awesome. And you're there flying with professional helicopter services as a pilot. Yeah, let's go ahead and talk about that. Where did you get your training?
So I'll just say PHS because it's a lot shorter than saying professional helicopter services. So their main headquarters is in Melbourne, which is where I was born and raised. So I went to school in Melbourne at Moorabbin Airport and learned to fly with PHS. I started April 2010, so a little while ago. And as we were discussing before, it's very expensive. So it was literally just like chipping away at it over I think I looked at my books, it was 6 years from start to finish for my license, for a commercial license. So yeah, did that. Pretty much made a nuisance of myself while I was there, like volunteered at every Formula One, like they do, because they're a pretty big company, they do all the joy flights. So Formula One, MotoGP, Avalon Air Show, like heaps of different things. So just ground crew. And so we used to fly in and out, which was really exciting. Freebies, tickets to these events. So it was kind of good. But yeah, did that. And then finally they gave me a job when I got my license. Yeah. So I worked at PHS in Melbourne for a year before they sent me up here as a pilot. So Yeah.
Got you. Were you working as a pilot in Melbourne, or were you just working?
No.
Okay.
So initially, I was working just on reception for
Hmm.
about 4 months. And then I moved on to the fuel truck. So I used to just drive out as ground crew on, we do a lot of power line surveying, LiDAR work, which is all the like thermal imaging, vegetation, stuff like that. So yeah, I'd go out, find a spot for the helicopter to land, to refuel, in back paddocks, in wineries, in wherever we were to do the power line stuff. Same with the fires, so support for the fires.
Oh yeah.
Um, yeah, yeah, we get them pretty big here.
Yeah. Kind of made national news last year.
Yeah,
Were you? Did you work on that fire at all?
I didn't because I was in the desert.
Yeah.
But the whole, like, we had to send two of our machines back to Melbourne pretty quickly to help with the fires. So what happens here at Uluru is we move aircraft because we've got a base in Queensland as well, which is on the east coast, which is a school, but it's also scenics and everything as well. So we have three main bases and we move aircraft around wherever the demand is. So for us, our peak season in the desert is in the cooler months when people are not so silly and they come to visit and it's not 42 degrees. So we'll shift aircraft up here to make sure we've got, enough coverage. So we might have 6 aircraft up here during the winter months. And then they'll move back to Melbourne for the fire season, which is usually, October, September, October. It'll start in the fire prep and all of that. So, yeah.
Interesting. So last year, like 2020, that wasn't even fire season when all that happened because that was March or February, right? January, February.
So it is still fire season. So our summer, the prep and everything will start September, October, and then the
Okay.
really hot months, January, February, March.
Yeah.
You get the really big winds and stuff like that that'll come through. So
Yeah.
that's when it really, you've got to be ready before then.
Yeah. Okay. That makes sense. Yeah. And speaking
Yeah.
of the temperature, you were saying that it's what 8:30 now p.m. where you are,
Yep.
and it's how hot?
38 degrees.
That's
Yeah.
crazy. Which
Celsius.
for
So yeah.
yeah, which for my American listeners, that's like 100.4 or something Fahrenheit. That's
Yeah.
insane. Yeah.
So I got to 41 degrees today. Yeah.
That's crazy.
That's hot.
Just like melt into the red sand.
Yeah,
Yeah.
seriously, I was sitting in the helicopter and I'm just like dripping sweat. And you just sit there while they load passengers. And you're like, oh, I just need to get off the ground because it's, 10 degrees cooler when you're actually flying around up there.
Yeah.
But sitting on the ground, you just,
It's amazing how fast it cools off. So,
yeah.
did you do any instructing?
No, no. So we run it a little bit differently in Australia. When you get your license, you enter into either mustering. So you go out to a cattle station, try and get a job, in the outback, doing cattle mustering, or you go into tourism and start getting those hours up, experience, doing laps. And then you might do your instructor rating because you need minimum, I think it's 500 or 600 hours to start your instructor rating because they don't want brand new pilots training the next one. It's a bit,
So,
we see it a
yeah,
little
so
bit differently. Yeah, yeah.
your system is more like Canada. I know they do that in Canada, which is opposite of the US, where it's like the
Yeah.
first thing you do is instruct.
Yeah, yeah. Blows my mind. But obviously, it's a system that works there, though. So I don't, yeah.
Yeah. So, and you chose tourism over cattle mustering.
I
Why
did.
is that?
Uh, Relatively, it's a much easier life. And I'm scared, I'm not going to swear, but I'm scared, scared of the type of flying
Yeah.
that they do with mustering. Heard a lot of stories, heard lots of stories from people and I have friends that do it, that love it. But testing the machine out to those limits and over the limits is, yeah, not for me. You got to have a lot of trust in that industry too, that the guy before you hasn't done anything, to the machine before you get in it. Whereas in scenics, you're pretty standard across the board of how you fly, and we've got pretty particular standards for it, and yeah.
Yeah, you're not
I
doing
enjoy
anything
it. I like
crazy.
the interaction with people. I mean, I'm a talker. I don't know if you noticed that, but yeah, I love talking too.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. Um, yeah, so cool. So you were born and raised in Melbourne, but you're also your dad's side of the family is from Indonesia. So you visited there a lot. Have has you? Wow, has you? Have you? Have you had like a lot of cultural? How do I want to ask this question? Have you had a lot
Exposure.
of what?
Exposure, like
Yeah, well, have you had a difficult time fitting into both cultures, like when you're visiting Indonesia or when you're living in Australia, or have you been pretty much raised in the Australian culture? How's that been for you?
uh, well, definitely raised in the Australian culture, but Indonesia has the largest registered population of Muslims in the world. So I also was raised with Islam, and then my mum's side is Dutch Australian. So I was also raised with Christianity. So I used to have Christmas and I had Eid, so I would get double the presents every year, kind of thing. But that was a plus. But I grew up doing Ramadan, the fasting, and sort of would go to Saturday school, Sunday school. But then when it came to when I turned 16, Dad and Mum have always been like, freedom of religion. That's what religion is. If you don't believe it, then you can't be forced to believe anything. So you sort of develop your own morals, ideas, all those sort of things with that sort of framework, just to be basically a good person. So when I go to Indonesia, a lot of my family is Islamic, but yeah, just sort of fit right in because I was brought up with that side. So I know sort of different behaviors and different customs and things like that. So yeah, it's never been an issue. Like I'll wear the headscarf, go to prayers, because at the weddings they have 3-day weddings, which are intense, but good, lots of fun.
I love that. I love cultures that do like the long weddings because it's such a celebration. Like, why do we do a 2 hour service and we're done? You know? That's interesting, and yeah, I can tell that your dad and mom had that view of religion because I mean they were married and they came from two different.
Yeah,
Like, how
yeah,
did
yeah.
that work? That's crazy.
Yeah, well, they both met in Melbourne when they were at university, different unis studying. Yeah, and so they met in Melbourne, and then that's just rest is history. 5 kids
Yeah.
later.
Wow. So yeah, you've been to Indonesia a lot. What is the culture like there?
Well, it's very. I think it's very different now to how it was when I went there, like as a child. I think I was 11 maybe when I first went over there.
Hmm.
Spent like a month there, traveling around, meeting different family and stuff. And the biggest thing I noticed is the culture change with the environmental impact and
Mm.
social awareness. Because in one respect, it's a third world country with all these little villages and quite a big poor population in slumming it kind of thing. And then you've got the city where they've got this immense wealth as well. Like so there are some family members where I'm like, they did what? How much did they spend on their wedding? Like what? Like it for me as an Aussie, where the dollar is worth so much more than the Indonesian rupiah, I'm in shock at how much
Yeah.
affluence there is as well. So I've sort of seen both, and I think yeah, the culture over there still doesn't matter which part of the family you're from. The family connection is very strong though. So my dad has traced our family back 500 years,
Hmm.
and we'd drive from the city up to the villages and meet people who knew people who knew people, and then you support them at their level though. So like you don't go in there and give them $50. That's a year's wage. Even though we could, you just don't do that. It's like, yeah, it's yeah, it's because it's a bit disrespectful as well.
Yeah.
And it's yeah, so it's yeah, just learning those sort of customs as well, and how you work with family and different people and from different areas. But,
Yeah, no, that's interesting. It can totally come across as disrespectful because it's almost like you're flashing your wealth, because it
yeah,
takes away their their dignity as somebody who can earn their wage. You know, that's
There was certainly, oh, sorry, go.
no, go for it.
So there was, I remember instances where we'd be driving up to the village, to visit cousins or grandpa or something, and you didn't want people to know you were coming because we were the family from Australia. They wanted to put their best foot forward. They wanted to show us, what they have, and they would send runners because everyone in the village knows everybody. They would send runners to go get chicken from this place, to go get sweets from this place, and they would spend their week's wage on a lunch for us. And so we'd try and not let them know that we were coming because they just wanted to show us and welcome us, and it was, yeah. So it was sort of mixed feelings a little bit, but yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting. So yeah, kind of coming from that culture, what is your view on how, like, what would you tell other people who kind of grow up in two different cultures? How can you navigate that and be polite to this culture and fit into this culture and kind of fit into both?
That's such a complex question, because it will always come down to you as an individual, your beliefs, your values, and you can always be nice to people. The number one thing in life is just be nice, Just seriously, you'll go so much further if you're just nice to people. But yeah, just have some respect and listen. Just listen and know where they're coming from. Like, I have some quite strong religious people in the family, and then I have some people who are very science-minded and they don't believe in God or creation at all. So we have some very interesting conversations at family gatherings. But yeah, definitely with two cultures, you just have to pick and choose the best bits, I reckon. And just, as long as nothing's harming or hurtful to anybody and you're very true to yourself, don't be afraid also to sort of let people go as well. I know, and not so much in my own family, but, friends and things like that, where they might have cousins or something that have a totally different outlook or culture, and it doesn't suit. And it's like, well, you're family, but yeah, we just don't need it,
Yeah.
So you just have to be true to yourself and do what makes you happy. And if you're uncomfortable in the situations, then you don't need to be in them, as much as you want to be nice to people as well. Yeah. You got to do what's good for you. So
I love that. That's fantastic advice. So if I were to visit Indonesia after COVID is over, what are some of the must-see places that you would recommend?
I would definitely go to East Java, into the mountains, where the big tea plantations are and the rainforests are, and it's just beautiful country there. The people are just lovely, amazing. Not just saying it because that's where my family's from, but yeah, like, it's a really nice part of the country. Not a lot of people visit Indonesia except for the islands like Bali. They might go to Kalimantan. There's a lot of surfing, so I know a lot of travelers will go to the islands to do surfing and diving and things, which is awesome. I definitely recommend going to Bali for that sort of thing. Stay out of the city of Kuta though. Just like go into the hills, go to the coast. It's mini Australia over there, so I just sort of get out a little bit away from the tourists. But yeah, definitely go to Bali, go to the Gili Islands. Some places that I was going to travel to but haven't yet would be like Sumatra, Sulawesi. There's some really beautiful animal reserves and things, conservation parks, untouched rainforest, which is really just will blow your mind.
That would be cool.
So there's that side as well, yeah. But the city itself, like I said earlier, it's changed a lot. There used to be a lot of rubbish, a lot of burning. They burn so much rubbish. that Singapore and like they would all be covered in smoke from Indonesia, it just drift across. It's gotten a lot better. Like they used to have more days of smog than blue sky. Yeah. The pollution levels were crazy in Indonesia. So they've done a lot to curb that. Like they have whole days dedicated, I think it's once a week actually, where they close these central roads through Jakarta, which is the capital. So it's only open for bicycles and walking, which we don't do that in Melbourne, or, there's some big cities that wouldn't do that, but it makes such an impact over there. Like just one day of no cars. It's pretty cool.
That's awesome. What's your favorite food from Indonesia?
So I'm like the adopted child. So mum used to cook food and she used to put mine aside because I really can't do chili. Like I start crying and coughing and like everybody else could do chili. I would have to hide in my room while she cooked it because even in the air, like I would be like, so yeah, I like the stuff that doesn't have chili, which doesn't leave a lot.
Yeah.
So like the two main dishes are satay, so skewers, meat skewers with satay sauce, the peanut sauce, or gado-gado, which is basically a vegetarian plate. So it has boiled eggs, it's got bean shoots, it's got cooked green beans, fresh tomatoes. It's just a big sort of, not mixed, it's all like portioned. Looks beautiful. And then you'd have that with dipping sauces and stuff. So a veggie dish. Yeah. They're probably my two favorite, satays and gado-gado. Yeah. And they're really easy to make too. So.
Nice. That's awesome. So yeah, when you were growing up, when you were a teenager, you also did an Air Force cadet exchange student program, right? In the UK. Tell me about that. How did that opportunity come about?
So I joined the Air Force Cadets when I was 13, and I stayed on until I was 20, which is the age you get kicked out because you're too old.
So you joined there in Australia?
In Australia,
Gotcha.
And it's sponsored, the whole cadet program, Army, Navy, Air Force is sponsored by the Australian Government and Defence Force, right? So for my parents, being one of 5 kids, it was a very cost-effective way for me to spend my school holidays and do other things because it was very cheap. I would go away for a week at a camp somewhere and it wouldn't cost anything and I'd be there for the whole school holidays, So I've been able to go to some really awesome places. So the UK one came up. You had to do an application. It was sponsored by Boeing, so they paid for all of the flights and everything. And we stayed at Air Force bases and military bases in the UK. So even transport, we were on the Queen's private jet, from one place to another. It was like, oh, the Queen sat here and we got served, sugar cubes in tea and biscuits, on the plane. Like, it was really cool. One of the guys was like, oh, I've sat on the Queen's toilet. I was like, oh, God. It's like, we're teenagers. I think I was 16. So it was pretty funny. But yeah, so I went a month exchange to the UK, which was just an amazing trip. Made some really lifelong friends as well, who I've then visited because it's a worldwide program. I visited them. I've got some friends in Belgium, Germany. So when I went to live in Germany a few years later, I was visiting the friend that I made in the UK. So yeah, I visited a few people in Europe from that trip. So really good. A couple have been to Australia to visit me too. So yeah.
Nice. Yeah. So tell me what you actually did at the camp. Like what were you doing there as an Air Force cadet?
The first week was a school holiday program for the UK cadets. So we went on a camp at a military base where there were things like excursions to learn about, or see museums, different military museums. We went to the firing range and we got to handle different weapons and fire different weapons, which was cool. We had scenarios, like team scenarios where we were versing each other, like tag kind of stuff. We have drill competition, so marching, like formation marching, which is pretty geeky, but I love that stuff. Like I used to be a cadet warrant officer, so I have the voice still, to call commands from 500 meters away or whatever. So that was really fun. And then the rest, we went on a tour basically to, Government House. We went to London Bridge, and it was just a cultural exchange as well. So we went to visit all the highlights in London, and it was all over. Just a bit of a mix of military and cultural exchange. So yeah.
That's awesome. And what about the Air Force Cadet program in Australia? What exactly kind of was the emphasis behind it, and what did the program do for you?
So it's really a youth development program.
Okay.
So you get kids starting, I mean, you can start at any age really, but you get kids starting at 13 like I did. So you're in year 7, first of all, you get to meet people that are not in your school. I didn't do sports. So I didn't have that sort of friendship group outside of school. But I had a big cadet friendship group because cadets is all over the country. So you would meet at these camps on the holidays, and you'd have 3 people that have come from, I'd name all these towns, but you wouldn't know any of them, but from all over the state. And then you'd have interstate camps as well. So, one trip I went to Canberra, and there were, 10 people from the equivalent of going from New York to LA or something. They'd just be across the whole country. You get 3 people from here, 2 people from there, and you'd all meet up and learn aircraft, general knowledge, basic aviation, the drill and ceremonial stuff. You'd learn bushcraft and fieldcraft, because we had excursions where we'd go camping in the bush, survival, learn to hunt animals and how to cook, prepare, that sort of thing. What other subjects were there? So it was a structured subject, so you'd have the induction level at sort of the 13, 14, then you'd have the basic, then you'd have proficiency, and then the advanced level. So as you move through, it was kind of like schooling, but with, you had exams and assessments and stuff. Mm-hmm. And then you have promotion courses as well. So you'd go away for a week and get your corporal stripe or your sergeant, So I did all those. But yeah, it was a good lead-in for leadership development, communication, personal development. I learned a lot about myself and being able to work with other people, team building. They actually introduced so with the promotion courses, they actually introduced recognised certificates, diplomas that went with that. So, I was 18 going on a 2-week course, and it was recognised certificate as frontline management for people, because I've just run a camp with 200 people and I've done, all that sort of experience, on the job experience. So yeah, it opened up a lot of things for me. It was pretty good. And then we are the biggest recruiter for the military as well. Mm. I think, of the recruiting for across all 3 services, the Air Force cadets is the most amount of cadets that end up in the military. Yeah.
Wow. Does each branch have, or does each service have a cadet program?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
So the Navy cadets is quite small, just like our service, it's quite small. The Army cadets has the biggest numbers. Again, they've got the biggest service as well. But I'd say the Air Force cadets, it's got a bit of a different training structure and focus, and it does tend to go more into the officer kind of roles in the defence. So you'll find across Navy, Army, or Air Force, a lot of them will have the Air Force cadet background. Yeah.
Got you. That's an awesome program. I feel like that's so important for young people, to kind of just give them structure and give them a focus and give them responsibility. Like, kids need that. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, I love programs like that.
So there was also flying camps and parachuting camps and things. So I went back as a staff member when I was 20 to 25. 25 to 30. So I took 5 years off, and then I went back for 5 years. And I had a student who was 16. She got her private pilot's license, and she flew her parents to Perth. So say from LA to New York and back by herself and her parents. Took a week, they stopped along the way as you have to. But she didn't even have a car license yet, because in Australia you don't get your license till you're 18. So she could drive, she could fly, but she couldn't even drive. So that was pretty cool. Yeah.
Wow, that's awesome. Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, it's probably more dangerous driving than flying anyway. So.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you'd mentioned you also went to Germany, and you did like the couch surfing, which it's funny because I don't feel like couch surfing is that big of a thing anymore. It kind of like peaked and then
Dead.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I still, well, actually, I haven't gotten it in a while, but I'd get like blog posts from couch surfing, and I was like, are they just trying to like, get people? But then now 2020 has happened, COVID, so I don't even know what's happening with them. But
it's the same with Airbnb though. I was having this discussion with some friends because Airbnb is pretty, pretty big, and it turns to money. Same with couch surfing. It just turned to money. It became a little bit less about connecting with people. Like Airbnb was connecting with people. You find a local who lives there, and you move into a house that may be a room or, a weekender or something, but there's character. You get to know, it's not in a creepy way, but you see the family photos or your books, and there's things there to go, oh, this is what someone in San Francisco lives like. This is what someone in Sydney lives like, But now, it's really difficult to find that,
Yeah, I think that authentic travel is it's what inspired me to start this podcast, and it is what I love about travel, because I really want to get to know different cultures and different people, and how people live in different areas of the world. Because like we were talking about earlier with your mix between Australia and Indonesia, like the different cultures, understanding how different people operate goes a long ways in helping us be more empathetic towards other people. Because not everybody's going to make the same decisions, and this goes down into politics, into religion, into all sorts of different things. And if we start getting upset at other people because they don't think like we do, then we're the problem, because we're not being empathetic and understanding where they come from.
Yeah.
So I think that's sad, but I agree. Like Airbnb, of course, they're public now. They're a publicly traded company. They're just like this huge thing. So it's hard.
But couch surfing, so I started in Australia because it was all based on profile, reviews, connections, and trust, right? So I started in Melbourne, basically just putting myself out there, saying I was available to basically be a tour guide in Melbourne. Hit me up for a drink, we'll go for a walk, I'll show you my favorite bits of the city, you leave me a review, I leave you a review, happy days, Again, I've still got friends from when I started that back in 2007, So I've got mates still from Melbourne. And then once I had I started it a few months, probably about 6 months before I decided to travel. And it was fully conscious, I'm doing this because I'm going to go overseas next year and I want to be able to, do this overseas. So when I went to Europe the following year after I graduated university, I messaged these people. I said, I'm going to be in your city from this date to this date. Have you got a room available or a couch or whatever? And they're like, yeah, come visit. Cool. And then in the places where I didn't know anybody, I would search for profiles. Oh, yeah, they're interested in this. Oh, these people are interested in that. And they'd say, like, oh, if you're going to stay with me, basically, as people say in Paris or London, the big cities, they might get 100 requests a week, So you had to really make it personal and read the person's profile and actually try and connect before you even meet them, and try and choose, because in a way you're kind of competing against people that want to stay with them because it's free as well.
Yep.
So I'd maybe write to about 10, 12 people, maybe sometimes if I knew a month before I was going, because I took 13 months of traveling over Europe. So sometimes it would be a month before, sometimes it would be 2 days. I'm like, oh, I'm jumping on the train. This was a 10 euro ticket. I'm just going to go there, wherever that is, And then I'd message, go, oh yeah, I'm coming to town tomorrow if you're available. And most of the time I got, 3 or 4 responses. So then choose as well, or choose to meet for a coffee, might not actually stay at their place. But you always had to have backup, especially being a young girl traveling by myself, had to always have a backup. So I never really understood the stories of people who go, had organized to go to stay at someone's place and then gotten into a bad situation, because I would personally always meet the host first, and you get a vibe off someone, you go, okay, yeah, cool, let's go to your place, and then we'll go out and do whatever. But yeah, I never had any issues traveling. But I certainly heard a few stories which were, a little bit disheartening as well. But it all comes back to the trust, the reviews, the system, knowing the system and making the system work for you as well. So, and I still travel like that,
Yeah, I love it. I remember it was like when it first came out, we were like looking over couch surfing profiles, and I do remember there were a couple, like it would be these single guys, and they're like looking for female guests only, and it's kind of like that's a weird vibe right there on the profile. So you have to be smart about it, and I think that's one of the biggest assets with traveling is being able to pick up on people's vibes right away. Because you have to decide whether to trust somebody or not trust somebody pretty quickly, and that can be tough. So I mean, you've already shared some good examples or good tips, but what about any other tips for traveling if you're a single female traveler? Most specifically, the safety issue.
Yeah, the safety side of things, huge. You've always got to have an out. You've always got to have a story as well. Because you might meet someone at a bar, you might meet someone at the beach. It doesn't have to be the couch surfing thing where you've organized to stay at their place, but you have to just always be aware that they might not be who they say they are, and don't be so forthcoming with all your personal information. Maybe don't let them know that you're traveling by yourself, or that you are staying at a stranger's house, or you're, that sort of stuff. You keep a little bit of stuff personal, especially when you're meeting new people in different cities where you don't have a support system there, and let people know where you're going. I got Facebook back when it was only for university students. Yeah, I know. I'm old now. But that was the best platform to connect with family and friends, like really quickly. I could flick a message, and it was free because it was on the internet. It wasn't messaging or phone calls. And it didn't matter the time zone or whatever. I knew that I always had, and same with people within Europe when I was traveling as well. They would get the message that I'm here, or I'm going here, or always let people know where you're going, because sometimes 24 hours, if you go missing for 24 hours, that's a long head start, for something to happen. So it's worth even 2 hours. I'm just going to the museum down wherever, or going to the beach. I'll check in at 10 o'clock or whatever. You got to be don't take it for granted. Like be open with communication when you're traveling, for sure.
Yeah, I love
we get that in the desert here. We actually, it was before COVID, but one of the girls, new staff member, only been here for a couple of weeks. She said she was going to go for a walk, and then she didn't come back. And it was like 6 hours, and we're talking it's heat. She'd taken a little 600 ml drink bottle with her. She wanted to walk to the rock, which you can't do. Town is, it's a 20, 30 minute drive from town, let alone trying to walk it, in the desert. So she'd just walked out into the desert, and we had to do a search and rescue. Luckily, the ground police found her first, and she was severely dehydrated and disoriented, and just if someone had told, or you'd asked, for directions, or you'd said what you were doing to somebody, they would have been able to give you the advice, oh, hey, no, don't try and walk out to Uluru. Don't try and do this. There's a better way to do something,
Yeah, man, that's scary. But that's so important. Yeah, I love all those tips. And I think the biggest thing is just being intentional about it and thinking ahead, not just kind of like going with the flow and then you find yourself in a really bad situation because somebody else was thinking ahead for bad
Mm.
purposes, and then you find yourself stuck
Yeah,
basically. So
yeah,
that's
yep.
awesome. Um, yeah, so now you're in Uluru, living in the
Hmm.
red center. um,
Yep.
so what is Uluru? Is that I'm saying it with an accent. It's probably just Uluru. How do you
Yep.
say it?
No, that's pretty
You don't
much
roll
it.
the
I
R.
probably
Okay.
say it with my own accent too, Uluru. Yeah.
Yeah, and
Wait till you
that's
get to Kata Juda, which is the other formation that's out here that 80% of people don't know about until they get off the plane and they go, "Oh my God, what is that?" Yeah, there's another formation out here as well, or there's a couple, which are pretty awesome. So when
interesting.
you come here to visit, don't
Yes.
just spend 2 days here. Like you got to spend a week. Like there's so much to see here. Yeah.
Wow, that'll be awesome. So, yeah, so Uluru is the name of the rock, right? What
Yep.
Yeah, so is it just beautiful? Like, what is some history about the rock? Like, yeah, what is it?
Do I put my tour guide voice on, like my
Sounds good.
helicopter? So Uluru is the largest single rock monolith in the world. It's kind of like an iceberg where it's just sticking up the top. This is a puzzle that has been hanging in this house forever. But that's the rock. Or you can go to my Instagram and check it out too. I've got lots of photos. But yeah, so we just see the top of it, and underneath it is up to 2.6 kilometers down. So it's massive under the ground as well. So basically,
It's like
it
a
was under the
rock
ground.
tooth. That-
Yeah. Yeah. So it wasn't just like put there. So it's basically in the ground, part of this alluvial fan, 500, 600 million years ago, we had this massive mountain range that all eroded down. We had the inland sea from all the melting ice caps and everything. The sea drained away, got really hot. We got salt lakes, the desert, the sand compacted. Basically, this fan of rock. We then had what's called the Alice Springs orogeny, which was about 150-ish million years ago. Big seismic shift, pushed all the pressure built up, and the rock twisted and pushed up like that. So it's on a 90-degree angle. So you see all the lines, in the pictures that go across it? They used
Mhm.
to be the horizontal sedimentary layers, right? So as it got pushed up, it was rotated in the Earth's crust. So that's why it's pretty special. And
Interesting.
then there's the cultural significance. Yeah.
Yeah, tell us about that.
So the Uluru Kata National Park is pretty unique because it's got two World Heritage listings, UNESCO World Heritage. One is for the park itself, the sand dunes, the rock formations, the significant habitat. The second one is for the cultural significance because the Indigenous Australians, sometimes called or referred to as Aboriginal people, but the Indigenous people here, they've been the longest running culture in the world, continuous culture. So over 60,000 years of evidence has been found in Australia of this culture. At Uluru specifically, it's between 30 and 35,000 years of occupation at Uluru. So yeah, mind blowing.
Wow.
Yeah. So there's a lot of not just the spiritual connection, but just human connection. With their storytelling and their knowledge of the land and how they teach things and pass things on for that length of time. It's just an incredible culture. So I'm always learning more and more. That's why I love it out here.
Interesting. So, how many, I guess, tribes of the indigenous Aboriginal people are there?
Oh, I don't know that number. There are
But
a
there's a
lot.
lot.
Um,
Okay.
yeah, so before European settlement, there were hundreds, over 200 different groups, languages. So it's kind of like you got Europe, right? You've got all these different people, right? Different languages, different cultures. We had that in Australia,
Yeah.
but they all got lumped into one. right? And so people would just go, oh, they're the indigenous people. That's one. No, it used to be there's, from all these different areas have different stories and different, ways of doing stuff, different knowledge to pass on. Because the people in the desert, they don't know anything about the coast. They never go to the coast, so their languages, unless they're trading, you've got those border languages where they start to mix, from one to another and connect that way, just like through Europe, Yeah.
Yeah. How did they survive there in Uluru? Like, do you have like natural oases there, or
so
they didn't have air conditioning? How the heck
no
did they
air
survive?
conditioning, no. Well, I'm not by any means an expert on this. I've lived here for 3.5 years, and I'm not an expert. So don't take what I say as gospel. This is my own impression and things I picked up. How much of it is true, I still don't really know, because lots of people say different things. But basically, like anyone, it's not like your backyard, this is your property, this is where you stay. It's the whole country. So you go where the water is, you go where the food is. It wasn't like nomadic, we didn't occupy this place, we went here, then we went here. It was one land, one area, but we were just down the back paddock instead of the front paddock, but it covers hundreds of kilometers, So yeah, they, just like anyone, they follow where the water is, where the food sources are. And yeah, that's how they survived,
Yeah. That's crazy. It baffles my mind how these people survived in such harsh conditions. Like, yeah. So you talk a lot about like the cultural heritage, you talk about the natural heritage. What else do you share as a helicopter tour guide pilot?
We do talk a bit about the European explorers, how things got their names, because obviously Uluru was known as Ayers Rock for a very long time. And visitors still come here and they go, oh yeah, Ayers Rock. And the only time I call it Ayers Rock is when I'm on the airwaves, because it's a reporting point. It's called the Rock. And same with the other formation out here. It's called the Olgas. But in conversation and in commentary and everything, it's Katajuda and Uluru, like that, because as I said, they've been known that for thousands and thousands of years. Like, who are we to say, 50 years ago, let's just change the name and call it, Ayers Rock,
Colonialism enters the chat.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I should say like 100 and something years, but yeah.
Yeah. That's interesting. So
don't fact check me.
What is a typical day like for you there as a pilot at PHS?
So at the moment, it's pretty different to how it was in 2019. So 2018, 2019, we probably the resort had its biggest years. Not only because tourism was increasing, becoming more accessible with the airlines and direct flights and stuff to Uluru, but because very well advertised was the closure of the Uluru climb. Used to be able to climb the rock to the highest point. But culturally, it wasn't accepted. So you had to be basically, there's sacred sites up there and things like that, and a very strong cultural connection to this place. And only certain people were able to walk up there from the Indigenous groups. So by having basically outsiders come in, climb the rock, it was more from a place of conquer, like, oh, I claim the rock, I've done it, rather than from a place of understanding. Because if we're really there to connect with the local culture and the people, you choose not to climb. So it was a really big thing over the last, 20, 30 years of not to climb.
Interesting.
And they had to, it was pretty hard with the tourism board and everything. Like, there was this strict criteria that was set out in order to say, yes, we can close the climb, because it was such a big draw card especially for international tourists and stuff to be able to climb it. But yeah, they met all these criteria, like the number of visitors, percentage of people that actually came here compared to those who came here to climb the rock. It got down below, I think it was below 15% of visitors or something like that, had to choose or chose to climb the rock. And it was like, well, we've hit that number. Obviously, there's other stuff for people to do here. So we'll close it. So it closed 26th of October 2019. And then we had 11 pilots. We had 6 machines, aircraft here, just with our company. There's another helicopter company and there's fixed wing as well that do scenics here. Whereas now we've got 2 pilots and 2 machines. We only just got one back a month ago. Yeah, so it was a mass exodus last year because the resort closed, everything closed in March. No one knew what was going on, This town really lives off, tourists. So if there's no one traveling, the town essentially went into hibernation. So my typical day now, I mean, it still feels busy because I might be the only pilot on, So I'm doing the pickups, the drop-offs, I'm on the phone doing the reception, I'm dailying the aircraft, I'm refueling it, I'm flying, coming back, doing it again, So I might have 6 or 7 flights, might do 3 or 4 hours a day of flying. So that's sort of typical, I guess. And, we do flights that are 15 minutes is our shortest one. Our longest one is like a half-day tour, which is just over 2 hours of flying, and we go out to another place called Kings Canyon. So we go out, to a few different places. Yeah, so always interesting.
Yeah, what's your favorite flight?
I really like going to Lake Amadeus. So that's the largest salt lake in the Northern Territory. It's about 15 to 20 mile north of town. And you fly over it to get to Kings Canyon. So those flights are always good because you still get to see it. But yeah, usually that's our 55-minute flight is to do Uluru, Kata and Lake Amadeus. And that is just beautiful. It is like a painting. Go check out my photos. It looks like it should be filled with water because in wintertime, it's really, really dry, so it goes really white. And then you've got these little islands of red sand in it with little bushes and trees. And it's just like a bay of islands. And then in the summertime, when we get rain, it changes colour. So you might get patches of water, and then you get algal blooms. You get different microorganisms growing in the salt crust. So they then change the colour as well, like blues, greens, blacks. That's probably my fave.
Wow, that sounds gorgeous. That's awesome. So do you find yourself doing shorter flights most often, or do you get to do the long flights fairly often?
At the moment, we do probably our number one flight is the 25-minute because you go to Uluru and you go to Kata as well. That's probably the most popular. A lot of things or packages or things that travelers are getting when they come to Uluru is 2-night or 3-night stays, right? So they come here, and a lot of them have planned different trips, sunrises, sunsets for Uluru. And then they haven't really planned anything for Kata. So the helicopter flight is the way that they get to see it because it's about a 50-minute drive each way. That's if you hire a car when you get out here. But if you're relying on a tour bus or something to get you out there, it's a little bit less accessible. So getting the helicopter is one way that people go, oh, we can see that while we're here, even though we can't go on the ground, to see it. So yeah, that's probably our most popular one.
That makes sense. And what helicopter do you fly, or do you have a couple different types?
We've got a couple of different types. So our main one is the Bell Long Ranger because that's 6 passengers. So that's really nice. We got it refurbed. It had its 1,200-hour overhaul, complete paint job, everything stripped. Came back looking super fly. So that one has the doors are windows, so it goes all the way to floor to ceiling windows now. So that's the scenic machine. It's like a big boat, like a limo. It's super smooth. We also have jet rangers, 206s, which are basically the same, but without the middle two seats. So that's our four passengers. And then in the peak season, we'll bring up the AS350 Squirrels. So that's 5 passengers, and the EC130. So we'll have 6 passengers in that one. So they'll come up. I think because we use them in Melbourne a lot, like over the summer, they also do a lot of charter work, weddings, all that sort of stuff, and the fire contracts as well. It kind of works well, to do the other half of the year in the desert when we're busy, in the wintertime. So, and same with the machine performances to a degree as well. European machines are a little bit suited to the cooler weather rather than, belting them at 40 degrees every day. The Bells seem to really love it and they do really well out here. So
That's
during
awesome.
the heat.
Yeah, man, you must be pushing it with the heat.
Yeah.
And are you type rated in all of them then? Are you able to fly every machine?
So I'm not rated on the EC130, but I do have the Jet Ranger, and then it's just a differences training for the Long Ranger. It's pretty similar.
Yeah.
And then the AS350 I've got as well.
Awesome. Cool. Well, if people wanted to get in touch with you and say, hey, thanks for sharing all your stories on the podcast, or finding out more about your piloting career down there in Australia, what is the best way for them to do that?
The best way is definitely Instagram. So I am Lily Pink, so li.li.pink, like the color, because that's my favorite color. I haven't grown up yet.
Don't do it. It's a trap.
Feel free to message me. I generally reply to all messages. But I try not to get too distracted while I'm on the job. So time zones and that sort of thing. But generally I'll reply to everybody. So say hi.
Yeah, awesome. All right, well, I want to finish this with a rapid fire facts section. Do you prefer beaches or cities?
Beaches.
What's your favorite city that you visited?
I want to say Melbourne. That's where I was born and raised, and I love Melbourne. But otherwise, I'd say Hamburg in Germany. That's also where I lived for a little bit, and it's very similar to Melbourne.
Yeah, love it. What is the worst food that you've ever tried? Besides Chili's.
Besides chili food, it was actually a drink, but we won't go there. But food-wise, anything that has that really strong aniseed flavor, I just don't have the taste buds for that. That licorice kind of fennel flavor, or the other one is big leaves of coriander. I call it the devil weed. When I taste it, like, I love Asian food, and if it's really chopped up and it's mixed in with like different flavors, don't really notice it, it's fine. But when you get big leaves and you think that they're parsley and it's coriander or cilantro, as it's also known as, and you eat it, it just makes me feel sick. It just ruins the meal.
That's hilarious. Do you prefer Apple or Android?
I was Android for so long, and I loved my little Samsung, but I got the iPad for doing all my nav planning and having set up in the aircraft. So then I needed the phone to communicate it with it as well, and so I ended up switching to Apple. But my laptop is still Windows though.
Nice. You've partially joined the cult.
Not
all the way in. Do you prefer group or solo travel?
Solo. Yep.
What is your favorite airport that you visited?
Changi Airport, Singapore. Oh my God. You could just live there. You don't even need a hotel in Singapore. You just stay at the airport. They've got beds, free massage chairs. They've got movie cinema. They've got gardens. You could just stay there.
It's a whole town in itself.
Yeah. They've got a slide. It's cool.
Do you prefer a strict schedule or go with the flow while traveling?
while traveling, go with the flow. Yeah.
I feel like as a pilot, you probably go with a strict schedule any other
Yeah.
time.
Yeah.
When you're traveling, do you prefer train or bus?
Train.
And last question. No, actually, where do you want to live permanently if you could live anywhere in the world?
This is really tough. But I think I would live in Australia, but somewhere warmer than Melbourne. Like probably the Queensland coast, somewhere up north there on the east coast, probably. Yeah.
Nice. And this is the last question. It can be as long as you want it to be. What makes travel worth it to you personally?
Just connection, human connection, cultural connection, and that leads to your personal development, and just getting to know yourself better and making your choices and making yourself happy and being able to then make other people happy. You know, that's why I love my job too. Like, you just deal with happy people. You know, it's not a job anymore. You know, that's what I think travel brings. Whether I might be here in Uluru for 3.5 years, but with all the visitors that I get in, I'm absorbing all their stories, and their cultures as well. And then I can then share that with other people. And then when I travel, you know, I'm sharing a bit of my culture, and leaving a little part of me wherever I go as well, you know. And so I just like that connection, and that's why you got to travel.
I love it. Well, awesome. Thanks so much for coming on and sharing your stories, Alida. I appreciate it.
So nice to meet you. Thank you very much for having me.
Thanks, guys, so much for joining. Hope you enjoyed this conversation. Again, be sure and connect with us on social media at Travel Worth Living or on our website, travelworthliving.com. And we will see you next week.